Hello, and welcome back to my channel.
Pakistan's 2022 monsoon season produced significant rainfall, devastating floods and landslides, affecting millions of people. The floods affected all four of the country's provinces and approximately 15% of its population. At the beginning of 2023 and several months after the worst of the flooding, an estimated 4.5 million people remain exposed to or living close to flooded areas, a decrease of 500,000 since early January 2023. Displaced people have started to return to their places of origin, but they are returning to challenging circumstances. Pakistan's Prime Minister Shahbaz Sharif said, "Pakistan has never seen a starker and more devastating example of the impact of global warming. Nature has unleashed her fury on Pakistan without looking at our carbon footprint, which is next to nothing. Our actions did not contribute to this." Despite being responsible for less than 1% of global greenhouse gas emissions, Pakistan is among the countries worst affected by extreme weather events due to climate change. Months after unprecedented floods ravaged Pakistan, vast swathes of cropland and villages remain underwater, while nearly 10 million girls and boys remain in need of immediate, life-saving support. By mid-January 2023, as many as 4 million children were still living near contaminated and stagnant floodwaters, risking their survival and well-being. Frail, hungry, children are fighting a losing battle against severe acute malnutrition, diarrhea, malaria, dengue fever, typhoid, acute respiratory infections, and painful skin conditions. As well as physical ailments, the longer the crisis continues, the greater the risk to children's mental health.
Flood-affected areas are shown in diagram. Now we will talk about the damages by floods. Direct and indirect damages. Direct damage refers to the monetary value of completely or partially destroyed assets, such as social, physical, and economic infrastructure calculated at the book value, or the depreciated value of lost immovable assets. Movable assets like goods, furniture, machineries, and inventories lost during the earthquake are valued at the replacement cost. Indirect losses are income losses, and comprise both the change of flow of goods and services and other economic flows such as increased expenses, curtailed production, and diminished revenue, which arise from the direct damage to production capacity and social and economic infrastructure. Wherever possible, damage and losses have been further split across public and private sectors to assist in macroeconomic analysis and to guide the development of public sector recovery strategies that optimally also take into account the recovery of private sector assets and services. Estimate of total damage costs by sector. Overall damage is estimated at 855 billion rupees. With damages in agriculture sector amounting to 429 billion rupees. On the other hand, rupee value of damage to the housing sector is less than one-third of that in agriculture, yet comprises almost 39% of the sectoral value added. With 44% of total damages, Sindh was the worst affected by floods, followed by Punjab and Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. The federal government also has a sizable share in total damages, although most of them are contributed by indirect losses of federally owned commercial banks and financial institutions. In direct damages, Sindh is on the top and then comes Punjab, while in indirect damages Balochistan also have a good 23%. In total damages, Sindh, Punjab and then the KP are leading. Agriculture. Agriculture has been the most severely affected sector, accounting for a full 50% of the estimated cost of overall damages. The overall damages and losses to the sector are estimated to be around 429 billion rupees. most of which are attributable to crop agriculture. As all of the crops affected by floods were ready for harvest, almost all of these damages can be taken as loss in subsectoral value added. This implies that the value added in crop agriculture, which was targeted to increase by 3.5% in 2010-11, is now projected to decline by about 10%. With major crops showing a decline of about 7% and minor crops of 20%. Livestock sector too suffered some heavy losses. The overall direct and indirect losses in the sector are estimated to be 48 billion rupees. As such, despite the loss of large number animals, value added in the subsector will decline only by 0.6% and the subsector is still expected to show a reasonable growth of 3.5%. Industry. Industrial sector was not unduly affected by the floods. It has also seen a significant slowdown due to input losses that the textile and food preparing sectors face. The slowdown in commodity producing sectors. Disruption of economic activity and heavy damage to infrastructure resulted in some deceleration in services sectors despite the positive fallout of reconstruction activity. Inflation. Inflation is likely to remain high. During 2009-10, headline inflation averaged a relatively high 11.7%, but it had been expected to decelerate this year. However, at end September 2010, the month-on-month headline inflation surged by 2.7%. This increase in the monthly headline inflation is driven by post-flood price increase of perishable and non-perishable food items. On month-on-month basis, prices of perishable food items increased by 14% in September, while that of non-perishable food items increased by 3.6%. Although this may be a temporary acceleration in prices resulting from flood damages to crops. Heavy government borrowing from the banking system to meet its burgeoning expenditure is likely to exacerbate the problem.
To counter these inflationary trends, the State Bank of Pakistan, SBP, the central bank, is moving to mitigate price pressures and raise the policy interest rate by 0.5% in July and by another 0.5% to 13.5% in September. Gross domestic product, GDP. Government's fiscal position is likely to get weaker as a large proportion of relief, rehabilitation and reconstruction cost would be borne by the government. Agriculture accounts for 20% of Pakistan's gross domestic product, GDP. Flood has damaged crops sown over 1.93 million acres. The country has lost around 20% of its cotton crops. The tragedy will strain the government's finances in different ways. Before the crisis, the budget deficit was expected to reach at 4.5% of gross domestic product, GDP, but now it could widen to as much as 6% to 7% of GDP. Obviously, to fulfill IMF conditionality in terms of budget deficit to GDP ratio is not possible in the present situation.